Please, please. Will's looking down on us from above. From above.
He's down below.
Evil Dead Burn arrived in the summer of 2026 as the 6th entry in a franchise that's outlived 3 separate creative regimes. Sam Raimi handed the keys to Sebastian Vanacek, the French director behind the claustrophobic creature feature Infested. And the result doesn't play like a legacy sequel chasing nostalgia. It plays like someone reached into the new French extremity tradition and grafted it directly onto the Necronomicon. Alice, a widow still absorbing the death of her abusive husband Will, joins his family at their remote house to grieve him, and finds herself trapped there as the Book of the Dead turns that grief into something little. What makes Burn distinct isn't just the gore, though there's plenty. It's how deliberately the film blurs the line between the demonic threat and the domestic one already sitting at the dinner table. You spend the whole runtime unsure which kind of horror is actually going to kill Alice first.
You thought I'd let you have all the men in this family to yourself.
Every Evil Dead film needs a body count, but Burn is unusually interested in what grief does to the living before anything supernatural even shows up. Alice isn't performing mourning for a husband she loved without complication. She's navigating a house full of people demanding she grieve a version of Will that never existed. The film keeps circling back to a simple, uncomfortable question. What does authentic grief even look like when the person you lost hurt you? That question doesn't stay theoretical for long.
Vous saviez qu'il s'était suicidé? Vous êtes morte. Et le petit garçon aussi.
The Returned takes the opposite approach from most zombie fiction and asks what happens when the dead come back not rotting, not screaming, but ordinary. A small French mountain town finds its deceased loved ones simply walking back into their old lives, looking exactly as they did the day they died, expecting everything to pick back up. The horror isn't in the reanimation, it's in the impossible position the living are put in, forced to perform love and normalcy for people who are unmistakably, quietly wrong.
That's the same trap Burn builds for Alice. She's surrounded by people who need her to grieve Will the way they do, publicly and uncomplicatedly, while she's the only one who knows what he actually was. The Returned understands that grief isn't really about the dead at all. It's a performance staged entirely for the living, and both works let that performance curdle into something closer to horror than comfort.
Grief doesn't happen in a vacuum, though. It happens in a house, surrounded by people who are supposed to love you and mostly don't know how. Burn wastes no time establishing that Will's family was never going to be a soft place to land, demonic possession or not. The dinner table hostility arrives well before the first Deadite does.
Eat it. It's good. Dumb some bitch wasn't no good if it hit him. Yes.
Resident Evil 7 drops you into the decaying Louisiana home of the Baker family, and what makes the opening hours so unbearable isn't the infection, it's that the Bakers were never going to be reasonable people even without it. Jack Baker's warped hospitality, the family's insistence you sit down and eat with them, plays like a twisted parody of Southern welcome that curdles the moment you resist it. Burn stages its own version of that dread around Will's family dinner table, where Susan's grief has calcified into resentment toward Alice long before the infestation starts. Both works understand that the scariest part of Meet the Family isn't the monster hiding upstairs. It's realizing the people already in the room were never going to let you leave easily, possessed or not.
That hostility isn't random, it's protecting something. Underneath Susan's coldness is a family still organized around Will, still unwilling to see him as anything other than the son they lost. Burn keeps circling back to how completely a controlling man can outlast his own death.
The Invisible Man reframes domestic abuse as a literal haunting. Cecilia's ex is supposedly dead, but his control over her life doesn't end. It escalates, using his death as cover to terrorize her with total deniability. The horror isn't the invisibility gimmick, it's the sickening realization that some men don't stop controlling you just because they're gone. Byrne takes that premise and pushes it into the demonic register. Will's death doesn't free Alice, it just changes the shape of his threat, as the house and the family and eventually the Necronomicon itself all conspire to keep his grip on her intact. Both films land on the same bleak truth. For some women, the abuser's death is just a new chapter, not an ending. And once that grip tightens, there's nowhere to put it down. The house stops being a place to grieve and starts being a trap. And Byrne spends its back half making that literal. Every hallway and staircase becomes one more wrong turn away from the exit.
Determine how long he likes to nurse.
Oh, God.
Barbarian builds its entire first act around a single dawning realization. This house is bigger, older, and far more dangerous than the Airbnb listing suggested, and every attempt to leave just reveals another door leading somewhere worse. The film weaponizes basic geography. The closer you think you are to escaping, the more the space betrays you. Will's family home does the same work in Byrne, an ordinary house that keeps producing new rooms and new threats exactly when Alice thinks she's found a way out. Both works understand that a truly effective siege isn't about locking the doors, it's about making the space itself feel like it's actively working against you. All of that dread eventually has to erupt, and when it does, Byrne doesn't flinch away from it. Vonnegut shoots the violence the way he shoots everything else in the film, unflinchingly, almost lovingly, in a tradition of French horror that treats the body as the site of the story. Titane doesn't soften its body horror for audience comfort. It shoots transformation and violence with the same painterly, unflinching intensity it gives its quieter moments, refusing to let gore be separate from the film's actual craft. The camera doesn't look away, and it doesn't editorialize either. Byrne carries that same DNA directly into a mainstream franchise, staging its most brutal set pieces, the dishwasher, the car, the possessions themselves, with a formal control that makes the violence feel considered rather than chaotic. Both films come from a tradition that treats extremity not as excess, but as its own kind of visual discipline. 6 films in, Evil Dead has never really been about the chainsaw or the cabin. It's been about whatever's already broken in the people who walk through the door. Byrne just makes that text instead of subtext and lets the Deadites do the rest.